Before we get into the show, I wanted to put out a hiring call. I'm looking for my next software engineering apprentice, a young .NET programmer to help me directly with my work, building architectural prototypes, figuring out new patterns, tons of coding. And I'm looking for a .NET programmer whose hobby is also programming. For the right person, programming isn't work, it's play. And besides a job, I can guarantee that you will learn faster than you ever have before. And I will invest in your professional education and we'll work together and you will grow. You'll report directly to me. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, just send me an email or give me a call. Now, let's get into our show. Voice User Interface with Mark Miller.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software consulting firm helping companies with business-critical software projects. And when it's absolutely important that it happen, ClearMeasure has a guarantee, and you can find them at clearmeasure.com. We're in a quick announcement. We're in the second year of the Software Architect Forums. Signups for the next session are up. And if you lead a team of software developers and are looking to collaborate with other peers who are doing the same, then you can sign up at the link in the show notes. And for those looking for Programming with Palermo, my video podcast, just search for it in any of the directories and you'll be able to find it. And my guest today on the show is Mark Miller, returning from episode 212 and a few times before. And he's an 8-time C# MVP with strong expertise in decoupled design, plugin architectures, and great user interfaces. He's the chief architect of the IDE Tools division at Developer Express, as well as the visionary force behind productivity tools like CodeRush. Mark is also a top-ranked speaker at conferences around the world and has been creating tools for software for almost 4 decades. And on top of that, Mark also streams live C# and TypeScript coding and design on twitch.tv/CodeRush. Mark, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Ever since that episode 212, I've been lost out in the internet out here. But you found me again, and I just want to send a message to my family. I'm okay.
That's right. That's right. Marked safe.
I'm safe now. Cool. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I'm fantastic.
All right.
Fantastic. Good to see you again. Yeah, it's been too long. And so we haven't been to the same conference in a while. So
that's true.
Well,
that's true. Yeah.
For the listeners that didn't see your episode before, you've been around a long time, and you've been a mover and shaker at Dev Express for 20
years
something. Yeah, ticked over the 20-year mark.
Yeah, 22 years I think now. We're at about 22.
Yeah, but just kind of back up and give us the high points of what's happened in your career that's kind of led you to working on the type of stuff that you're working on now, which seems to be all about user experience and how people use software. I'll let you give the version.
Well, okay, yeah. I'm going to maybe extend the question, make it slightly broader in terms of how did I get here, and not just focus only on user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, my passion lies in creating developer tools.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing I've been doing for about 30 plus years. I haven't really been tracking, but I started creating developer tools before I started creating CodeRush, and before I had other tools before that I sold and as a result of my own company. So back in the olden days, I was programming in DOS, and my first tool that I ever created, or when I say DOS, there was no Windows yet.
Mm-hmm.
All the interfaces were essentially text-based, and I created a text-based interface and tooling that was so cool. It allowed you to drop a checkbox, a text based checkbox on a designer form and bind that checkbox to an actual Boolean somewhere in your code. And when the UI was displayed, it was essentially data binding, is essentially what it was, 30 years ago. And it had the ability to go out, check the value of the Boolean, display a check or not state. And as you made changes to it, it would live update the Boolean. And if you hit cancel, it would restore it to whatever its default value was in case you ever hit cancel. It's not quite the way we do it today, but it was a very interesting, unique kind of way of doing things. And when I created that tool, I experienced essentially feeling of exhilaration, because I was able to create things faster and kind of mind-blowing that other people couldn't do with such a small team, right, is what I had. And that tool was just for me. It was for a translation company that I worked for. So it's always kind of, even in that space, I was working with companies that were working with Microsoft and at the time Novell and Hewlett Packard, things like that, like the big companies back then. And as I started, the more I programmed, the more I'd get into a point where I'd be like, oh, you know what? This is not fast enough. And I'd be, in part because I'd always be racing. My ideas for what I wanted to create or the code I wanted to write would always be far ahead of what my fingers could keep up with.
Yeah.
And I was a medium speed typist. I wasn't like I was really slow. I wasn't like blazing fast with zero errors, but I was, above average, I think. But I was still struggling to keep up. So I started building tools. Eventually I got to CodeRush, and I've essentially been building and maintaining CodeRush across 2 different platforms, first initially for Delphi, and then we switched over in 2002 to go to Visual Studio. I've been spending my life there. And the thing I love about it, I love developer tooling more than anything else because I get to use what I write. And I get to just, ultimately it's whether I use it or not that determines whether is it a good feature or not, right? I could come up with a great idea, but if I don't use it so much, that great idea was still great, but as a feature, as a sellable feature, as something I can give to other people, it has less value if I'm not depending on it every day, I think.
Yeah.
So along this path, I started focusing deeply on user interfaces. And I've been doing so for, I think, about 14 years. I've been just deep in looking and understanding those, to the point that I'm a self-reported expert in the area, right? I essentially have declared my expertise, and even to the point where I can see UI from large companies like Apple or Microsoft, things like that, current guidelines, and I can come in there and say, well, here's where you want to tweak this guideline, or here's where you want to change this piece, and here's why, right? And, connecting ideally to a study of some kind or some, sequence of arguments that lead to a rational conclusion. And what's cool about that is that I can come in and, when I give my talk at conferences, I'll be like, see this thing that you see all over the place? Here's what's wrong with it. And here's why you want to change it and fix it. And here's why you want to tweak it. Here's how you want to tweak it and why. And again, citing some kind of study, something along those lines. So anyway, that's how I got here. I've got a passion for efficiency. And that's why I'm passionate about great UI, and that's why I'm passionate about developer tools. It's an obsession with efficiency, and that's why I'm here.
Nice. So it sounds like that original DOS checkbox was your first developer, your first UI control?
Yeah, the thing is that I had a checkbox. I want to say I had the basic kinds of things. I certainly had buttons as well, but the buttons weren't linked to anything.
Yeah.
But I had text boxes that could be linked to strings. And to be honest, I don't recall if I had a list box or a combo box or not, but I feel like I did, because I have this visual memory of things that look like lists. But the checkbox is the thing that I've retained. I know I had the checkbox. I know I linked it. And it was very cool, right? You'd link it in and it would give you a list of Booleans, and you just select the Boolean that you'd want to connect it to.
Yeah.
Right? And then the UI for connecting and building these dialogues was built using the same, UI and technology.
Yeah.
And it became effortless to create things that otherwise would just be just a pain to do really well.
Yeah.
Right? I could even do things like I could attach enabled status of other controls to a checkbox. So if the checkbox was true, the other controls would be enabled. And if it was cleared, it would not be the case. Yeah, it was certainly my first, dive into UI. I don't know if this is probably not interesting or maybe obvious to a lot of people, but I was not great when I started. I have made a number of mistakes, or I've made decisions without knowledge, right? And later I've come back and realized, oh, okay, that's problematic, or this was missing this decision was missing that piece of information. And so I've gotten better.
Sounds like you were pretty inexperienced when you started.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, definitely.
Until you gained experience.
Unlike everyone else.
That's right. I was born at a very young age. And then from there.
In fact, doctors were impressed at how young I was. They said I was the youngest person they'd ever seen.
That week. So, well, nice. And you've been engrossed in user experience the whole time. And we've talked on previous podcasts and known each other for a long time. There's so many young developers listening to the show. Do you have like the high points, the quick rundown on the paradigms of user experience over your career, like the ones that really stand out to you that were big shifts?
Big thought shifts in user interfaces. Well, I kind of want to jump to between the years 2007 and effectively now. There's in this space, you've got development of the release of the iPhone, which for the first time you see a major product created for the masses, where behind the product you've got really strong, and maybe not the first time, maybe we can go back even further and say like Microsoft Word, something like that. Microsoft Word is maybe the first paradigm shift, because you're going from WordPerfect, which is a DOS-based, text-based UI, into a Windows-based UI. And Microsoft Word had a number of innovations that I think a lot of people could dismiss, because we see them now all the time and we're like, okay, no, it's,
we're
that's
used to it.
Just what we naturally expect, right? So there was some good stuff there. But I think that when I started paying attention to UI, 2007, you have release of the iPhone. And you also have another thing that's happening on the web, which is A/B testing is starting to grow in popularity. And people are using A/B testing like crazy, and both paths are resulting in more efficient UI. So you can know nothing about good design and just do A/B testing and get to a point where you've got essentially great UI that does what you want it to do, right? And what you want it to do, you want to get the customer's money, right? You want to get the customer to register, right? You want to make that process as easy and efficient as possible. A/B testing will tell you that answer, right? Do we have people slowing down because we've given them too much text, or something like that? Then maybe let's give them less text. Something along those lines. But also A/B testing will tell you how to do dark design patterns, how to manipulate people into doing things you want them to do without without regard for ethics, for example, right? Without regard for empathy for the customer. So, but as far as paradigm shifts go, you've got one company where you've got, I think Johnny Ives is his name, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but who is in charge of design at Apple. He's not there anymore, as I understand it. But one guy who is obsessed and focused with great design, and including things like how do we get the customer to be able to do the things they want to do, like forwarding an email in fewer clicks, in fewer taps, right? Less movement, less ambiguity along the path, less chance for error. Right, we're focused on, for the first time you see design from the inside coming in with an extreme amount of care and sophistication. And that's happening about 2007 up until now. And I want to kind of say that's kind of it. We're here. And the next, I think we're going to see, I don't know, maybe I won't speculate on what happens as we go forward, but essentially we're going to follow the rules, and the rules are that the most efficient path wins, right? And so if I, as a customer, can engage with the website or the app in a way that gets me to where I want to be fastest and easiest, that wins over another one that takes me longer to get there, right? I'll choose your app instead of somebody else's, for example.
Well, one paradigm that I've certainly seen you working on a whole lot is how to interact with the computer without having to leave the keyboard and go to the mouse. Just all the CodeRush shortcut keys and everything, or having to tap a touch screen with your finger. Like the keyboard is one, and then of course, touch screen is another. But you've also been working on voice. Right. What's the new, where are you putting your efforts these days?
Well, I've been spending the better part of at least the last half year immersed in voice. I have, by the way, been looking at voice as an alternative input means, and I've looked at actually a large number of different alternative pieces of hardware to try out in terms of input. But I've been looking at voice for, I'd say, easily about 25, 30 years. And for about 27, about 80% of those years I've been looking at it, 90% of those years, it was a no. It couldn't work. Mm-hmm. It was a no because it took too long, it took too many resources, it was slow, it was inaccurate, that sort of things. All of that changed actually in the last year. In the last year, two things happened for me. And I say it changed, or at least my awareness of it changed.
Okay.
So in the last year, I tried Azure Cognitive Services for the first time. And I was essentially stunned at how accurate it was and how fast it was. And it feels like a brilliant architecture in the background. It feels like it. I've pushed it really hard, and I've seen maybe a little minor little blemishes and things like that, like things I'd like to fix. I'd like to be able to say, hey, I'm talking about this subject, for example. I'm talking about source code. Mm-hmm. So it might, because right now it gives me a translation like I'm just a human speaking to another human, maybe, for example, right? So I could be talking about anything, but I'd like to be able to give it subject matter expertise in a way that goes beyond what the current abilities are. That's an example of what I call a little minor blemish on it. But aside from that, I tried it. It was fast, and it was surprisingly accurate. The second piece is ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. ChatGPT has the ability to take text and essentially come back and effectively understand it, as an example.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the features that I added to CodeRush, which sits in Visual Studio, and I should say CodeRush is free, so I'm not selling anything to you other than the idea of trying this tooling. Mm-hmm. But CodeRush, I just got distracted by my disclaimer there, and I think I lost where I was headed, Jeffrey.
Well, as you were saying, Cognitive Services is ready, and ChatGPT understands. That's and it. We have to say that CodeRush is free. We will put a link to it in the show notes because, hey, if people have never heard of it and have never given it a shot, they should.
Yeah, especially now. And now I'll show you in a second. So we were so I don't know, about 4 months ago, I'm like, okay, well, let's create voice commands for Visual Studio. And let's make it so that you don't have to be precise. You can say the essence of what you want. And so we built that, and we use ChatGPT, or essentially the OpenAI interface, to infer intent. So I can create a command, a voice command that's connected to the words build project or build solution, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then I can check a checkbox that says allow semantic equivalence. And if I do that, that means that I can say things that are similar to build solution, and it'll still build the solution. So I can say compile everything and, or compile all the projects that I've got in my solution, as an example, or something like that. I can say something different. And if it doesn't immediately recognize it, it'll send the text off to OpenAI. OpenAI will come back and say, here's what I'm pretty sure you meant. And here's the command that I select out of the ones available, and go ahead and, grab that and execute that. And that's what we did.
Nice.
So that's one of the first pieces that we added. And the end result of this is that, so there is one voice command I use all the time, and it's the killer voice command feature. And it's open file, essentially, is what it is. To do it, I say open and then the name of the file. And in a small project, this is the most boring thing you've ever seen. But in a project that has 15,000 files, right? I can open files faster by voice than I can with the keyboard or the mouse. And I can do it by probably about 10 times faster on average with a huge solution. So if you have a big solution and you're constantly opening files because you got to open this file, work with it, open that file, and you don't have faster ways to get to it. In other words, you kind of know the name. And even if you know only part of the name, you can still get to it by saying open and then saying the essence of the file name. And it effectively opens up instantaneously. And by instantaneously, I mean sub 300 milliseconds, probably something like that. By the time you finish talking. Because this is the cool thing. You look a little bit like you're thinking about that, and I'll explain how is it so fast, right?
Yeah.
It's so fast, and this is what I get at it by inferring that I think they have a brilliant architecture behind Azure Cognitive Services. I think what's going on is as I'm sending out my voice to it, they are working on that from the start. And in other words, as I get to the end of the sentence, they've already figured out a ton of possibilities and everything. They're just got to work out the last word. They probably know what it's going to be anyway, right? So when I say the last word and then I release the microphone key, I'll explain that in a second, but I release that microphone key to say I'm done talking, then it gets me the translation immediately, sends it back.
Including the round trip up to Azure.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh yeah. It is stunningly fast is essentially where we're at. And so it is, you want to open up a new file. All you do is you go in and you say, open and then the file name. And that's it. I can show you a quick demo of it so you can get a sense of the speed. We'll go into, I'm going to go into the CodeRush source code. I've got 15,000 files over in here. And first thing I'm going to do is hold down. So I said the microphone key, it's the control key is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to hold down that control key and I'm going to start talking.
For the listeners, Mark is showing something on the screen. If you want the video version of this show, it'll be on YouTube. You can just search for it, but we'll try to do a good job of just narrating as well.
Yeah, if you're listening in, we're going to do our best to not forget about you and explain what's happening. So right now I'm inside Visual Studio, and I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to say open, followed by the name of some sort of file. Before I do that, actually, though, I want to bring up the Solution Explorer. So I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to say show me, and then I'm going to say the name of a tool window. I can say any tool window in Visual Studio, right? What's exciting about that is I've just now opened up accessibility into the 110 plus tool windows that ship with Visual Studio. It's really exciting from my perspective because it's a feature that adds on to Visual Studio that makes it easier to access Visual Studio, right? And I love it when we do that. So I'm going to hold down the control key and say, show me Solution Explorer. Oops, I held down the wrong control key. It's the left one I need to hold down. I'm so focused on the demo, I forgot what I need to do. The left control key is for commands. The right one is for writing code. Gotcha. So we'll do it again. Show me Solution Explorer. And what's happening is there was a little bit of feedback that came up there that gave me a microphone volume level while I held down the control key, told me what it was listening for. That's how I knew I held the wrong key down because it was saying expressions before. And then later when I held the correct one down, it said, we're listening for a command, go ahead and say it. And then it said, while it was thinking, it figured out what it was going to do. So I've got the Solution Explorer up. And I'm just doing this so I can see the name of a file. I'm going to grab a file I see in the list. So I'm just going to hold down the control key and say the name of it after the word open. Open Visual Basic Import Service. And it's already open. And that's it. In fact, it's open faster than you can really verify that it's open, right? It takes us a second to be like, wait, it's there, right? It's already there. And it's that fast to open files. I want to open something else, open syntax node facts, like that. And now we've opened up that file, right? Open solution remove tasks. And that one I didn't quite say correctly, but I still got it. I said solution remove tasks with an S, and it gave me the one without the S on it, which is kind of cool, right? You can remember part of the file name. Like I'm going to try and get this one, test runner workspace, without saying the word monitor. See if I can do it. I don't know. Open test running workspace monitoring. So there, I just messed up the words, and there it gets it. So I got close to it right there. Right, test runner workspace monitor opens up.
Makes me think of SoundX.
Files.
It's like a more intelligent SoundX. The old SQL command that we would use to compare strings that would just normalize consonants and vowel sounds and give us matches.
Yes. It's a little bit like that. I actually looked at using phonetics to solve this, and I found that not using phonetics was actually worked really well anyway. So,
yeah, nice.
but it's similar to that. It does not require everything to be a perfect match. It finds the best thing it can find.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
ClearMeasure is also happy to be a sponsor of the video podcast, Programming with Palermo. Watch, learn, and program alongside Chief Architect Jeffrey Palermo. Videos are added weekly and available on syndicated locations supporting video podcast or by visiting palermo.network. Tune in today.
If you know exactly the name of something, then you can map it. That seems pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of back in the green screen software days, we didn't have trees and menus for navigating to different screens. There was like function keys, or there was a screen code or screen number to jump to a particular form. And I'm wondering if what is this going to change? Like, I'm thinking navigation, that's where my mind goes, like just finding a page on an application, as an extension. But where do you see this? Like, your mind is going forward to all the different applications, all the possibilities. If you could project into the future, what's the big impact here?
Well, if we're going to stay focused in the area of code, I think the big impact is voice to code.
Okay.
And I think that impact has got a window of maybe a couple of years before the Copilot and things like that get so good that we're not even writing small bits of code anymore. But I think that, we've got easily 2 to 4 years where developers are still writing small bits of code. And in my experience, small bits of code are generally the things that slow me down.
Mm-hmm.
So the voice features that we've added to Visual Studio are much more than just the voice commands. One of the pieces we added, which I think is really pretty easy to get your head wrapped around if you're only listening to the audio version of the show, is voice dictation. So I can be inside a comment, hold down the control key, and I can say whatever I want to be in the comment. And I get it done. And I'm like, okay, now I can write the code again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The impact of a feature like this is that I move forward through what I have to do, right? Getting all the to-dos and things that I need to put in the code, right? With a lower cognitive load, right? The end result is I have a lower cognitive load after each task, after each piece is done, and I'm more refreshed all the way through my day. That is significant. And I've never written a feature that I think is as good as this that really, really helps out in that space. Now, I should maybe point out that CodeRush already has a lot of features that we're bringing to the table. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there are things that CodeRush really could not do up until now. And one of those things is it couldn't take what was in your head and turn it into a camel case identifier, for example. It couldn't do that. You had to type the whole thing in.
Yeah.
Right? Also, just typing in expressions by themselves, it's a little tedious, even with IntelliSense, right? If I have a lambda expression, I've got open parens, close parens, I got an equal sign, I got a greater than symbol, right? At the very least, not to mention some dots. If I have an instance called A, and it's got a property called B, or a method called B, that returns a class with a method called C, that returns a class with a method called D, and I want to call it A, B, C, D, right? That's going to be lots of open parens and closed parens, lots of dots between all of those. That's going to take some time. Every time I move my fingers off of the home keys and I'm searching for a tiny little key, like the greater than or equal sign or the parens or whatever, that takes cognitive load. It takes effort when I have to go more precise. So what I've done with the voice to code is I made it so you have to be less precise. What you can do is you can say A, B, C, D, without any dots. And it'll figure out based on the code that you have where to put the dots, whether it's a method call or not, whether to put parens inside, but it'll give you the expression ABCD. And maybe ABCD isn't like I first described. Maybe you've got an instance called AB that has a method called CD, and it'll give you that, AB.CD.
Yeah.
Right? All the possible variants, it'll explore, and it'll come back with the best match. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to do things like you be inside an if statement, inside the parens of an if statement, you can say something like, my points list count greater than 5. And it'll find the variable called points list or whatever it is that's closest. It'll see if it's got a count property. If it does, it'll add it. It sees the less than, it generates the binary expression, and it heard you say 5, so it's going to put the number 5 in there.
Yeah.
Right? It's that, and it's so fast and so effortless, right? Once you start using it, you're like, oh, wow. So I think in terms of where this, the next big impact with voice is at least you've got room before we've got, our AI so good that it's writing all the code for us. There is room for a voice-driven interface and that understands the context of where you're in and finds the best path to the whatever you're trying to do. And this could be beyond just code, right? This could be in your app, that whatever you're developing, right? If you're considering this.
Yeah. Well, there was a previous show, I can't remember it now, but the conversation about AI and generating code, and the conversation turned to the question of, well, if the thought coming out of my head is what code I want written, then when does the description of my thought turn to be the source code and us version control the prompt in Git versus C#? And now that's an unanswerable question, but there's always this gulf between me coming up with an idea of what I want and whatever language happens along the way to get to a point where a computer can understand, okay, now this code language that can be compiled into things, and the libraries get more and more abstract. But I'm even thinking of, like, as you were talking, I know I'm getting back a collection from something and I need to just iterate on it and do something on every one. And I could type and shortcut, or maybe I could say, for each in list, console write line item. And could it generate the code that I'm imagining in my head faster than even the shortcut keys at some point?
Yeah, well, I think we can get close, is what I think. I think that we're kind of heading into this space, and each time we incrementally get closer to really true effortless experiences in terms of getting our work done, the pieces that are a little less effortless start standing out more, right? So it's this kind of iterative approach. But do you mind if I show you a few code examples of some of the things we talked about?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Please. And while you pull that up, I'm imagining before there's been a very difference between like a sales floor in a building with a whole bunch of chatter and people on the phone, and then the coder floor, which is like tippity tap, but like dead silent. And now you're going to go into like the coding floor, and it's going to be just as loud as the sales floor because everybody's like talking into their computers. I get that. This may not be, for everyone, but I will say that, look, if you're on that coding floor and you're working with giant solutions with tens of thousands of files, the file open pays for itself all alone. Oh,
right?
Totally. No, it's great.
So I wanted to come in and do an assert that right here. So I'm going to hold down the right control key because I want to create an expression. And I'm going to try to access this my calculator. And my calculator's got a method in it, I think called add two numbers, something like that. What's it got?
So you've got a unit test pulled up and you're working on the assert statement.
Together. What'd you say?
You're in a unit test and you're working on an assert statement.
Right. I'm so sorry. This is Jeff telling everybody what I should be doing. Thanks, Jeff. That's exactly what. And so I've got a method called add two numbers together inside there. So in my assert that call, I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to try and reference my variable, my instance of super calculator. And I'm going to try and call add two numbers together, and I'll try and pass it two numbers. So I'm going to say my calculator, add two numbers together, 4 and 5, like that. And it got pretty close. It gave me 445 instead of 4 and 5. So that's close enough. I just make a quick change there, but I've got everything else. It gives me my calculator that add two numbers together.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to hold down the control key and say is equal to 9. And it finds the is instance that's out there in the end unit test case, that class, the is class, finds its equal to method and pops in the 9 that I said. If I want to rename something, like I'll come up here and I'll just hit F2, bring up Visual Studio's rename, right? So it's Visual Studio's user interface. I'm going to hold down the control key though now, and I'm going to say, this is my really cool method. And I release the control key.
Rename.
While I said it, there was some UI that said new identifier. So I could see that it was going to build a new identifier for me. It uses, by the way, if I go down to this, it uses the syntax, or not the syntax, it uses the casing of the identifier I'm renaming as a model for the new thing that comes in. So in the method example, it started with an uppercase T or an uppercase letter, and so it kept that, and so it gave me a Pascal case identifier. But I've got a camel case identifier in the code, my calculator with a lowercase m. I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to say, this is my super calculator. Well, I hold down the control key, and it keeps the formatting, essentially. It keeps the casing, right? So it gives me a lowercase t at the beginning. The impact of that is that I don't have to make I rarely have to make any changes. And the cool thing about this, right, is that this was the thing that CodeRush could never do until now. CodeRush couldn't take the name or the idea of the thing you want to call it, especially if it was big, and help you do that in less time. It just couldn't do it, but now it can. Now you can say, here's what I want it to be.
Now, is that because of Cognitive Services, or is that because of the OpenAI service?
That is because of neither. That is because of what's happening behind the scenes. So there's essentially 3 components to the architecture. There's OpenAI that's used for inferring intent on voice commands. There's Azure Cognitive Services for doing speech to text. And then there is an engine, essentially, that we've built or specialized a variety of engines that are specialized for doing different things. One is for finding files in your solution and opening them up. Right? The cool thing about opening up files is I don't have to say the extension, which is also kind of cool, right? I just say, the name of the file, and it finds it and opens it up. If I do want like the XAML version, I can say .xaml or something like that. With this code and with the example you've just seen, where I've said the words, this is my really cool method, and I got a camel case or a Pascal case identifier, everything, all the uppercase characters for the beginning of every word, that's done with this behind the scenes engine that's dedicated to creating new identifiers. Does that make sense?
It does.
So, and when I open up files, there's a dedicated engine for finding files. And when I create expressions, there's a dedicated engine for doing that, including a sub-engine for recognizing spoken numbers. Right? And so that's kind of how that works. I want to go back to add 2 numbers together. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to create a new XML comment. So I'm just going to type in 3 slashes for the add 2 numbers together. It's given me a param name blocks for parameters, my 2 parameters, which are named num1 and num2. And now if I want to do a comment in here, I can just hold down the control key and say, this is my cool method, like that. And it's typed it in for me.
Yeah.
But if I want to reference these parameters, I can hold down the Alt key while I speak their names. And so as an example, I can say, this cool method takes num1 and num2 and puts them together, like that. And now watch
param ref.
So Jeff is saying param ref, what's happened is it's found num1 and num2, and it realizes it's in an XML.comment. And so it's now replaced them with param ref name num1 and param ref name num2, right? Because we're trying to get there faster. Jeff's smiling and laughing a little bit. Let's see if we can make him push him even further. Let's go inside an interpolated string. And I'm going to do the same trick. So when I'm in a comment or in a string and I want to use this trick of getting code, I hold down the Alt key when I want to reference code. So I could say the value of name of num1 is num1. And there I held down, well, it looks like it got it slightly off there. It did name of someone instead of num1. We'll try that one more time, see if I can get it on a second try. The value of name of num1 is num1. Did I do the alt? Yeah, I think I made it. No, we got the same thing again. Well, the cool thing about this is I have a shortcut I can hit that allows me to then create a test case for this. So I can take a look at it, what's happening inside of here, and I can see the individual words. And if I was a customer, I can send this to us and we can go build something for it. So at any rate, that's my test case. I can take a look at that later and see what that does. But the cool thing is you see what it's doing here, right? As it's getting here, right? It's seeing the num1 references, that sort of thing as we're getting in here. And it builds the interpolated parts of it as well by giving you those curly braces.
Yeah, this seems like a different take on GitHub Copilot, where with GitHub Copilot, not the chat portion, but the part that can generate it. It's looking in its big old large language model of all this other code, and it's going to give you back something based on other code, but this is doing exactly what you're asking it to in the context of just this code. But I'm wondering how they're going to mesh together.
Yes, and this is what I love about it. It's like, let me show you actually one more example that does exactly this. Right, I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to just come in here and I'm going to say date time UTC now minus time. So it's just an expression that is grabbing the variables that are on that what's in scope.
Yeah.
So it found the date time on class, and it found the UTC now property in it, and it found the local time variable.
Mm-hmm.
But I have inside a method that says get age and days. So I want to let me try that again, but I'm going to now try to get total days at the end of that. So I'm going to say date time UTC now minus time total days. And notice what it did differently now. Instead of just getting that starting expression, it now has to realize that total days does not exist on date time instances, but it does exist on a subtraction of UTC now, date time UTC now minus the time. So if I do the difference between two date times, I get back a time span.
Yeah.
Well, that's an operator overload, right? What is going on? It's evaluating the expressions and looking at all the different possibilities for interpretation, evaluating the types, checking to see if we can find a match all the way through, right? And as a result, all I have to do is say date time UTC now minus time total days, right? That's kind of an example of what's going on. This is me all the time. Sorry, Jeff, I do this all the time. I'm going to create a new class. I'll call this test class. It's one more thing. Let me show you one more thing. We're going to create a new method. Actually, let's create an enum. And it really show you how voice and CodeRush work together. To get an enum, I hit the letter E, and I'll hit the space bar. Now I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'll say ice cream flavors. And there I've got an enum called ice cream flavors. I'm going to hit enter. Now I'm going to do this all one-handed, maybe just one finger. I'm going to use one finger to do all of this, okay? So now I'm going to say chocolate, and I'm going to hit enter with that one finger. I'm going to say vanilla, holding down the control key. Oh, I said vanilla. It came back with say vanilla because I held the control key down too quickly. I'll correct that by holding the control key down again and saying vanilla. And then I'm going to hit enter, and then I'll say strawberry, right? Enter, rocky road. Enter, and I can keep going, building this. That's all I'm doing to build an enum with all those different elements by using voice to enter the text of the names, right? And also, because it's so effortless to have a name of any size, you can now have better named variables instead of just having things like X1, X2, or whatever you would normally maybe be accustomed to. Maybe I'll stop there. I'm gonna stop on the demos because I feel like I'm that guy, and I don't want to be that guy.
Well, I know that you just kind of put this in place in the last several months, but as you were talking through scenarios, my mind is racing because there's a lot of time. There's the boilerplate code. For instance, if there's a new class that's going to be a persisted entity that's going to map to a database table, I've kind of got a picture in my head about, okay, I need to lay down the structure. This is going to be a person class with properties, first name, last name, age, date of birth, address. I mean, just like there's tons of boilerplate all the time where I know exactly in my mind what it's going to be like. And I'm just trying to figure out how to get that through my fingers to the keyboard so that it's on the screen as quickly as possible. And yeah, if you could just narrate all that.
Wait, what? I didn't hear the last thing. What did you say?
And if we could narrate that and have it just lay down quicker than I could possibly type, even with shortcuts, that would be really cool.
No, I love it. I love it. We're not quite there yet where you're describing, but I love it. Right now in this release is coming out on March 4th. And in this release, we are essentially promising simple expressions, the ability to do simple expressions. But I'll tell you, I'm super excited by this technology, and this technology is built to grow. Mm-hmm. It's built to, like I said, we've got a built-in command. With this command that I hit when we had the unexpected results, it tells us the words that were spoken, at what offset each was spoken at, right? So we know exactly the time that word came back from Azure Cognitive Services. Tells you when the alt keys were down, when the shift keys were down, what all that information, as well as some sample code from where you were working with, so we can have that contextually. And if you choose to send this to us, and it's not only that, Jeff, look at the top of the file, or hold on, let me get it so you can see this here. The top of the file of the text is an actual NUnit test method.
Yeah, with the attribute.
Right? So it's the whole complete test method we need. And the only thing we need from you is this text plus your expectations. Mm-hmm. What did you expect it to do instead? Which makes it real easy to submit. In fact, the developers were like, "Oh my God, you made it too easy for people. We're going to be only doing this for the next 6 months." And I'm like, yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe we will. It's actually exciting because if that's true, that means a lot of other people are getting excited about it as well.
For sure. And if it encourages more, or if it helps people learn test-driven development easier, faster, with less stress, then it'll help adoption as well and help reduce defects.
Yeah, I think you're right. And don't forget that you're going through your day with a lower cognitive load. Mm-hmm. So your mind is fresher. And that also, I think, contributes to a reduced number of errors during the day.
Yeah.
Fewer mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So March 4th, and that's when people can start, demanding additional features for a tool that they're not paying for. Is that right?
That's, I guess, correct. I didn't think about all of this until now. We might be in trouble.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're putting this inside CodeRush, but shoot, I mean, this has more, even broader implications than just for code, if it were to apply, but one step at a time.
Right. One step at a time. Yeah, no, I have been there are times where I'm elsewhere in Windows and I'm like, I want to hold the control key down to dictate. Right. And I can't. And I'm like, am I going to have to be the guy who builds this tool to make this work? Mm. By the way, so it requires keys. CodeRush is free, but Azure Cognitive Services is not. However, my daily intake or my daily spending on voice services is pennies a day. Yeah, it's not that much. It's I think my total monthly budget is less than $5, something along those lines, for the two, for both OpenAI and for my usage of both OpenAI API and Azure Cognitive Services.
And you got it mapped to control just because that's convenient for you, right? But you can map it to any kind of key combination.
Not in this, really. Not really. The control. So there's things are very intentionally chosen, right? The control key is easy and close to hit. You can set a threshold for volume, so you don't have like a misfire in case you're in a room with a lot of talking when you're hitting the control key. Yeah. You can make it so that only a volume above a certain level triggers it. And I will say that I'm also. Do you know what a Stream Deck is?
Oh,
Jeff,
yeah.
do you have a Stream Deck?
I got one right here.
Yeah, I'm working on I'm also working on a Stream Deck interface to Visual Studio. Mm-hmm. And that's probably going to come out maybe end of the year, something like that.
Yeah.
But the Stream Deck interface, we actually created the ability on the Stream Deck to have buttons that indicate voice. I'm speaking now to Visual Studio.
Yeah, there's so many.
So that is possible. It is possible to go a different route, like what you're talking about, but we're not doing it yet. I think really we have to look at what demand is, and that's essentially we're demand driven in terms of features and things like that.
Yeah, there's so many devices that are effectively just a keyboard input, and they just you press something and it maps to some type of hotkey combination. Whereas you got one of those devices and you mash it, boom, there's your hotkey.
Yep. Speaking of hotkeys, there's another feature in CodeRush that's kind of killer, but we don't talk about a lot. But it's caps lock as a modifier. So just like you can flip a switch in CodeRush where caps lock can suddenly be a modifier. And what's cool about that is that it opened up all kinds of shortcut bindings for us that were otherwise taken by the host environment, right? And in fact, if you can imagine being a plugin for Visual Studio for 20 years, you can imagine what happens when they come out with a new release that takes one of your shortcuts that all your customers were dependent on and now binds it to some new feature, right? Well, the caps lock prevents that from happening, and it also allows us to do some incredibly cool stuff, like one of the most frequently used features I use is caps plus the space bar. So they're both big keys, easy to hit, and caps space means essentially fix this. Fix whatever is at the caret. So do the thing that you can do. And that's what it does. And if there's ever ambiguity, you'll sometimes do these two things. But as an example, inline temp is a good example of a fix it kind of thing, right? And so you've got caps space to do fix its. You've got caps plus insert to add things like new parameters, things like that. And you've got caps delete to clean up and remove dead code. Wow. And so with those three keys, I do a ton of refactoring like instantaneously, right? It takes less time to execute it in Visual Studio, even if I'm executing a Visual Studio refactoring, than it does to show the Visual Studio menu to show you what's available. Does that make sense? I can execute the refactoring instantly by shortcut. And so I have all kinds of caps bindings, like also for declarations. I want to declare a new auto-implemented property, it's caps A. A new field, it's caps F. And so it's this idea of saying, well, let's take the keyboard. What can we do with it? We don't have the resources to add our own Copilot key. We can't do that. But we do have the resources to take a look at this key that's not been used ever really in coding and give it additional functionality.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, hey, we're at the end of our time here, but this is absolutely fascinating. We'll include the links in the show notes, and people can go check it out. And of course, any audio only listeners, this episode you probably want to look at it on YouTube, and you can see what Mark was showing on the screen for those different parts, and that'll be there. But man, Mark, this is fascinating. I love just listening to you and your philosophy and what things are coming up, because it's always really forward thinking.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Yeah, well, I'm doing my best, kids. Doing my best.
Awesome. Thanks. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.